and welcome to Changing the Ovarian Cancer Story, a podcast from the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition. Together, we are shining a light on the most lethal of female cancers, sharing stories and raising awareness. I'm your host, Hannah Vaughan Jones. Today, we have two remarkable voices, one from the perspective of the patient and the other from the doctor who cares for her. Christiane Amanpour needs very little introduction, a world-renowned journalist, multi-award-winning war reporter, and CNN's chief international anchor with her own eponymous nightly show. In 2021, Christiane revealed that she had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The consultant who guided her through her diagnosis and treatment is Dr. Angela George, an oncologist in gynecology at the Royal Marsden, a world-leading cancer treatment hospital in London. Both women join me now. Welcome to Changing the Ovarian Cancer Story. Christiane, Angela, it is so great to have you on the podcast.
Good to be here with you, Hannah.
Thanks for inviting us.
Now, Christiane, let me start with you. As journalists, we don't tend to like being the story, which is why I'm even more grateful that you are completely doing the opposite in this case. So let me start by asking you, if I may, how you are. Is today a good day?
Today is a very good day, and we can discuss with Dr. George, Angela, as I've come to know her, because I have it again, but it's being very well managed. And so this is one of the whole things that people have to understand about some cancers. I did reveal mine publicly in 2021 because I was off the air for 4 weeks and people started to ask about, where am I? Have I been fired? Am I alive, dead, whatever? And I decided when I got back in front of the camera after 4 weeks, which included the surgery and a couple of weeks of recuperation before I started chemotherapy, I decided, to say something because I actually wanted to do a service, not just to my viewers, but also to those who might be in a similar situation. And I wanted to say what had happened to me. And I wanted to say, listen to your body, because part of the reason I got such quick care was because I listened to my body and went straight to the doctors.
So take us back then to diagnosis in 2021. What first prompted you to go to the doctors and the process of diagnosis that followed then?
Well, it was in the middle of the on-again, off-again COVID lockdowns. I had missed one of my annual, what is it called? Anyway, I've forgotten the name now, but I used to get internal, internal ovarian checkups because my aunt had what we thought was ovarian cancer. It turns out to be endometrial cancer and died of it. So I kept having these tests, but I missed one during the lockdown. And then I started to feel a pain in my side. And it wasn't a urinary tract infection. It wasn't anything that I was familiar with. And it really did hurt, especially when I went to the loo and tried to urinate. And when I was biking and would go over bumps, I could feel it. So I thought something is not right. So I went to my GP eventually. And unfortunately, my actual GP was away at this particular time, and there were a lot of replacements. Anyway, I kept getting moved from one to another. They thought it might be bladder. They thought it might be this, might be that. I did a lot of tests, except there was no, specific blood cancer or the cancer marker test. And I said, I think it's time I went to get an ultrasound. That's what it is. So I went to get an ultrasound and they immediately discovered something. And I had an MRI as well. And they didn't tell me, but they told my GP. And then very fortunately, I was directed to the Royal Marsden, and that's where I met Dr. George, and the surgeon, who we call not doctor anymore in England, is Ms. Marielle Novenhouse, who's one of the leading gynecological, oncological surgeons in the world.
As a truth seeker, which I know you are, I imagine you had a million questions as well. And Angela, if I could come to you and find out some of the answers to that, because I wonder how common Christiane's journey is from diagnosis, the symptoms, and actually then developing a care plan as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to really point out is most women, by the time they get a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, will have often been going back and forth to the GP for, sometimes a year or so with abdominal symptoms, and it often gets misdiagnosed as reflux or indigestion, urinary tract infections, irritable bowel syndrome. So it's really common for women to have that kind of experience of going back and forth until they finally get a test and someone picks up that they have an ovarian cancer there. And I think, most women, by the time they get a diagnosis, might have had the cancer for 3 or 4 years before it actually gets diagnosed.
Presumably that's where the biggest time lapse is at the moment, where the biggest problem is.
Exactly. And that's why most of the women that we see are actually diagnosed with late-stage ovarian cancer, because it doesn't have a lot of specific symptoms that people can pick up on, and it does tend to be misdiagnosed for quite a long time.
And we often hear this term late stage. What is considered late stage? And Christiane, if you don't mind me asking, what was the stage that you were diagnosed with at first?
Well, mine was officially 1/2 because it was 1, but it had adhered a little bit to my pelvis, and so they called it 2. But I think it's really important to note, and Angela was the one obviously who told me, that I have it's an anomaly. It's a fairly rare kind of ovarian cancer. So I'd love Angela to talk more about it, because I think that's important, because I was afraid, because it was called the silent killer, and I didn't know how long I'd had it. And until the surgery and the pathology and this and that, I was not sure. But it was, Angela told me what it was and why I was potentially lucky, because there were actually pain symptoms. As she's just told you, there's often no symptoms. So many women don't know. So I feel that I was lucky.
Yeah, we often hear, don't we, Angela, about the silent killer, and whether it is actually silent or whether we're just not listening. What are the symptoms? And talk to us a bit more about Christiane's particular diagnosis.
Yeah, so as she said, Christiane has one of the rarer types of ovarian cancer. In sort of our population, it makes up sort of less than 10% of the ovarian cancer cases. And it is one where we do sometimes see a larger mass on the ovary, which is why people are more likely to get pain. And that is often how it gets picked up. And it often gets misdiagnosed as appendicitis or gallbladder or something else along those lines in women. And so sometimes it's picked up almost accidentally at those early stages. The more common type of ovarian cancer, the high-grade serous subtype that makes up about 60%, we don't tend to see those types of symptoms. And so that's almost always diagnosed after it's spread through the abdominal cavity, and when it starts to do things like create fluid in the tummy, which is when women sort of turn up and look like they're pregnant because they have large quantities of fluid. So for the more common type of ovarian cancer, that's often how women get diagnosed. And by that stage, it's very widespread.
We've heard a lot already in this podcast just from people talking about that sort of feeling like they're 6 months pregnant and still being ignored sometimes by their GPs or being sent off in the wrong direction. I want to move on to talking about the treatment, Christiane, because you had surgery quite quickly, I assume straight from diagnosis, and then some 18 weeks of chemotherapy. What was the toughest part of the treatment for you?
Well, look, I was pretty scared before the surgery. Luckily, I had friends who, kept me distracted and kept me encouraged. The surgery went exceptionally well. They took out pretty much, just about everything. And I also asked them to take out my appendix. And I did that in the memory of a friend of mine who had appendix cancer, which is apparently a 1 in a million, but she ended up unfortunately dying. So I said, please take out my appendix as well, just in case. So, empty cavity, no cervix, so no more pap smears or anything else. And, I thought it was fine. And they told me it was fine. And they did tests and, checked nodes and bits of the rest of my body to make sure it hadn't spread anywhere. And I'm pretty strong and good constitution, do a lot of exercise, eat well, etc. So I left hospital fairly quickly. And then I can't remember exactly, but several weeks afterwards, they started me on the chemo regime, which was, I believe, 16 weeks. It was cycles. They call them cycles. And that involved going into the hospital and having the intravenous. And I reacted badly to the first one, but I was told that was quite a common thing, that you can react badly to the first time. But it was fine. There were all the doctors there. They came and fixed me up. And then they gave me a port, which I put into my arm instead of my chest. And so the port meant that I didn't have to get stabbed every week into my arm, into my vein, which I don't like. And the port did everything. So that took my blood, it received the chemo, and I did that for however long it took, 6 cycles. And and then I was fine. I put on an ice cap in order to make sure that I didn't lose too much hair, and I didn't lose too much hair. I laugh because I kept my bangs, the fringe and all the rest of it, and the stuff around my face. And I said, "Oh my God, this chemo must know I'm on television." And you know, so for me, that was lucky. I did lose a bit around the back, and it did thin out, but it didn't panic me at all. I wasn't worried about that stuff because I was assured it would regrow, and I just was happy that I was in the clear. And that I was, I'd been taken care of incredibly well.
Christiane, you're known for holding the powerful to account and for being a powerhouse in the field. You must have had to really flex your resilience muscle, I suppose, in going through this treatment. Do you think that your career and the fact that you're known and maybe you feel like you're a tough cookie, that sort of helped you sort of get through it?
Interestingly, yes, because I say I do have a strong constitution, but equally interestingly to me was that I essentially, the word surrender is not a great word because it sounds like you give up, but I put my hands my life into the hands of the experts. And I just said, you are the people who know what's going on. I'm not going to be, running this show. You are, and I'll do what you tell me. And I was confident in that. And I think that's also important to tell people, because I know people talk about a battle and we're going to fight and we're going to do this. That's true to an extent. You have to keep up your morale. You have to keep your health up. You have to, be mentally prepared. But it's also, I was told, cancer, not by Angela, but by somebody else who was telling me and who's also an expert. Cancer is a permanent condition that has to be managed. And once that was said to me after it came back, and we can talk about that, I sort of went into a Zen mode that it's a permanent condition. It has to be managed. And as long as I'm fortunate enough to have the people who are managing it for me with my full cooperation, I could deal with it physically and mentally.
Yeah. And Angela, Christiane obviously is very high profile, has a very demanding job. Does that play a role in navigating any kind of a treatment plan and also in navigating your own relationship with your patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to, when you're thinking of treatment plans for anyone, you have to work around the specifics of the person, and everyone has something that you need to take into consideration. And in this case, it was things like travel and when we were sort of negotiating sort of dates for treatment and working out, where Christiane was going to be, because, she was off to Ukraine and she was off to the US and things, and trying to think about what, bacteria she might be exposed to or infection risk, all of those types of things you have to sort of take into consideration. But I think also Christiane made it really easy because, as she said, she was very much, okay, well, you're going to take control of this and you're going to give me the best possible treatment and you're going to tell me what I need to do. And that's how we've done it right from the start, really.
Yep.
Christiane, you mentioned at the beginning that your surgeon is also a woman. How important is it to you then to have your care and your treatment all being headed up by women? And how important do you think that would be for other women and other patients perhaps listening to this podcast also dealing with ovarian cancer in the first stages?
Well, look, it ended up being very important because I was completely relaxed and confident in their hands. It's not that I went out and sought women, because I wouldn't have known who was what and what was who. But I was really, really grateful that all the main carers around me, Dr. George, Ms. Nobbenhaus, and others, even the woman who first basically did my ultrasound and found the actual cyst, tumor, whatever you want to call it, the malignant thing, was a woman. And it's helpful. It's very helpful because I think you operate on a very similar, psychological plane. And I have done a lot of reporting, as you know, about women all over the world. And I know how women are often dismissed in every field or fashion of the human experience. And I know also that in medicine, patients who are women are often told, go take an aspirin, oh, you're being hysterical, et cetera, et cetera. There have been plenty of books written about this, and my own experience as a reporter and as a human being, validated that. So I was exceptionally pleased also. But having said that, I've had great male doctors as well. So I would not want to say that it's only women. I'm super grateful, and I really feel very close to Angela, who I see almost every 3 weeks now, every 6 weeks or so. And we've been, a team, and I say a team, for the last 4 years, because every 3 months I would have to go and get my CT scan and my blood test, the general monitoring, which is how I found it the second time and how I found it the third time. The fact that I'm monitored all the time is a superb insurance policy, and Angela is there every step of the way. She's the one who calls me and tells me what my scans said and what my blood test says and what everything else says. So it's a very close relationship, and it's incredibly valuable and incredibly successful and productive.
And Angela, I'm sure you've got some fantastic male colleagues and there are male physicians around you working in this space as well. So we're not kind to sort of like knock them all down or anything like that. But is the female factor a real factor, a big factor for you from the medical side of things when it comes to having female physicians being able to speak to their female patients and diagnose things from a female perspective?
I think it really does make a bit of a difference when you're dealing with these types of things. And I think, I inherently, can immediately talk to them about things like, our hot flushes and those menopausal symptoms. And I think having that lived experience of some of the things that we put people through with treatment and side effects and things, it does make a little bit of a difference because, as you say, I work with some amazing male colleagues, but at the end of the day, it is a slightly different conversation with them as it is with another woman. And I think a lot of the women do find that more helpful.
And I know you're an expert in ovarian genetics and cancer testing. Christiane's mentioned about her aunt already before. If there's someone listening to this who's maybe had an early diagnosis or a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, or they know that there's a history of ovarian cancer in their family, what can they do? What are the first things that they need to do?
So actually, ovarian cancer is one of the more genetically related cancers. About 1 in 5 women with ovarian cancer will have an inherited gene alteration that has caused the cancer in the first place. And increasingly, that is really important for how we treat these cancers because it can point to better treatments, the ones that people are more likely or less likely to respond to. And it also gives us more information about the behavior of the cancer in future and prognosis. So anyone with a diagnosis of ovarian cancer should be asking their oncologist about whether they should be having genetic testing. And anyone who has a wider family history of ovarian cancer, it's worth investigating whether any testing has been undertaken in the family and whether they should be undertaking that themselves because, it's a really easy cancer to prevent in people that we know are at risk. And as we've sort of been discussing, it's a much harder cancer to treat once it's established.
There's been so much in the press recently. I mean, it feels like cancer is everywhere and there's reports about there being an explosion in cancer cases. We know that ovarian cancer cases are on the rise as well. What do you put this down to? Is it a lifestyle choices or just the environment that we're living in now that means that there is seemingly more cancer around?
I think it's probably multifactorial because lots of cancers are increasing, but specifically for ovarian cancer, we're seeing a lot of women turning away from using the oral contraceptive pill, and we know that that is protective against ovarian cancer. In sort of my mother's generation, it was pretty common for women to have things like their tubes tied, and we know that was protective against ovarian cancer.
Wow.
And we're seeing the increase of things like endometriosis, which is specifically linked to several types of, one particular type of ovarian cancer. So I think there are the things that used to give some people protection, we're seeing less of in the population, and the things that perhaps increase the risk of certain cancers, we're seeing more of. So it's a bit of a perfect storm.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. Christiane, you touched on this before, talking about your family. And one of the things that we want to get into more throughout the podcast in this series is to look at the care network and just not just the patient, but also the people around the patient who are directly affected as well by ovarian cancer. How important were your friends, your family in helping you get through this?
Oh, I mean, priceless. There's no way I could have got through it without. I cannot tell you. Woo!
Take your time.
I'd never actually asked for help before. And when I did, I got it. My family, from my friends, from my colleagues, from everybody. And it was really, well, it was touching, but it was really helpful. Really amazing. And as I say, it really sustained me because it's not just the illness, it's the you know, your state of mind, your everything. And to have all these people who just literally every day were asking me how I was, how they could help, visiting, giving me things that I still have my comfort blankets and my herbs and my lavender pillows and my, all these things that people gave me and the cookies and the tequila for after my for after my chemo. No, but it's the community is actually vital, absolutely vital. And I'm just so very lucky that I had that. And I got a lot of support from all over the world, and it was really incredibly helpful for me. Absolutely.
You have reported from all over the world as well, and so
Yeah.
you've got a lot of life perspective just from your career alone. Has this ovarian cancer given you a new perspective on life?
Okay, I don't know about a new perspective on life because, unfortunately, my career has been about uh, witnessing people in the most extreme areas of existence, and so there was always life and death in my reporting. And all I know is that I've been very, very lucky. It gives me a perspective on the incredible debt we owe our doctors, our scientists. It makes me furious when I hear this nonsense that's sometimes paraded on, in various quarters of conspiracy theories and this and that about various different diseases, medicines, vaccines. I think that, we can't thank or care or pay enough our doctors because they are the professionals. They're constantly researching. They're constantly looking for all the new things. I mean, I was advised but to tell my family, the women in my family, to consider, if they were through menopause and stuff, to go and get all the right blood tests and maybe have hysterectomies, this and that. There's just a lot of of care and work that goes into what people like Angela bring to this, and you just can't be mindful or grateful enough
Yeah.
how hard they work, and it just makes me mad that this assault on science and truth and in the United States withdrawing funds for cancer research and all the rest of it from the main teaching and research hospitals and universities. It's outrageous, and so many people's lives depend on it.
And of course, it's not just the initial bit of treatment, but then it's the ongoing treatment, the aftercare as well. And Christiane, I understand that you're going through, is it immunotherapy right now?
But I'm gonna let Angela talk about it because I obviously had all the relevant organs removed, but it came back a couple of times in a lymph node. Take it away, Angela.
Yeah, so immunotherapy is a treatment that isn't suitable for all women with ovarian cancer, but it does work really well for Christiane's particular type. And we had done some testing on her tumor, which showed that immunotherapy would be a particularly good treatment for her. And immunotherapy is different from chemo in that basically tumor cells are normally very good at hiding from the body's immune system. So our immune system is always looking for things that shouldn't be in our body, like bacteria and viruses, and it normally does a great job at killing those cells and getting rid of them. But most cancer cells manage to stay invisible to the immune system. And what immunotherapy does is it basically alerts the body to the fact that those cancer cells are there and teaches the body to find the cancer cells and destroy them in the same way that it does sort of other abnormal cells like viruses and bacteria. So it basically is a really exciting way of being able to find the tumor cells and destroy them. But the problem with most tumor cells is that they evolve and they mutate and they start to look different, which is why chemotherapy sometimes people become resistant to. With immunotherapy, the idea is that once your body learns to find the cancer cells, it keeps destroying the cancer cells. So we give people a course of immunotherapy, and generally can often see really long-lasting results that go on for many years.
And is it grueling, Christiane, or is it the easiest part?
It's the opposite of grueling. I have no side effects. I take pills every day, and then now every 6 weeks, I go into the hospital and have an infusion of the other drug that goes with my particular cocktail of immunotherapy. But I will also say that I am incredibly lucky because I have private insurance through my work. And because I have that, I can get this. And I'm in this case and in many cases part of the 1%. And that also makes me sad because there are many, many other people who need help who can't get it yet.
Yes, yet, exactly. We're so thrilled, of course, that you're healthy and you're with us today and you're talking to us in such a sprightly way as well. I know that you've got your own podcast that's out at the moment. I'm about to listen to the latest episode as well. It's the X-Files with Jamie Rubin, your ex-husband, talking all things world affairs. I doubt whether you've touched on ovarian cancer yet.
No, we haven't, and we won't.
I think the latest episode is talking about Trump's Gaza plan. Of course, today we're recording on the day of the 2-year anniversary, of course, of October 7th as well. So we should recognize that. How are you finding podcasting, and how are you finding it with this, whilst you're in treatment and whilst you're in recovery as well?
Listen, I'm diversifying. We hear a lot about how we need to diversify in our business with a cable. What is the future? But I also wanted to do essentially what I do, which is analyze and interview around foreign policy, but do it in a more conversational manner, less as a journalist and more as a conversationalist. And Jamie and I, my ex, we had some issues. That's why we got divorced, but foreign policy wasn't one of them. And although I do disagree with him on quite a lot of things, and of course, it's not just the horrendous anniversary of what happened and what Hamas did on October 7th, but the ensuing war. And let's just face it, unfortunately, that has been a catastrophe for the Palestinians. Health encompasses everything.
Yeah.
It's everything. It's political, it's social, it's it's all about the equality and inequality gap, and it's personal. So that's what I've discovered, actually. I've become more aware of that during this journey, just how lucky I am and how unlucky, but for the grace of God and for where people were born and what geopolitical reality they live in, many, many others are.
Well, that's a really good place for me to maybe put my final question to both of you. And we ask all of our podcast guests this. What gives you hope? Angela, to you first.
I guess from the medical side of things, I think we're really starting to unpick some of the drivers of cancer. So if you can find the switch that turns the cancer on in the first place, we're getting much better at finding a switch that can turn it back off again. And I think that's really what gives me hope, is we're starting to make some real progress in a number of cancers along that line, and hopefully we'll continue to do so, particularly with some of these more difficult ones.
Christiane, to you.
Well, what gives me hope is that everything I've experienced and benefited from, what Angela said, and the medicine and the treatment and the care, but also what gives me hope are some of the people who I report on. Jane Goodall recently died, and she was 91 years old. She was, a scientist in her own right. She was a woman. She defied all expectations. She discovered that chimpanzees can actually make and use tools, and upended the whole relationship between the natural world and the human world, and told us all essentially that it takes a village. We are, a community of people, and my hope in this time of deep, deep partisanship over everything, including science and medicine, is that we will understand that we are stronger together, that we're stronger when we unite our professions and benefit from all the knowledge that we possibly can. So that's what gives me hope.
Christiane Amanpour, Dr. Angela George, thank you so much for being on Changing the Ovarian Cancer Story. And thank you, the listeners, for listening and for watching as well. Remember, you can follow us on your podcast app to get every episode in your feed. And please do press that subscribe button on YouTube. This series is produced by Annabelle Deegan and Jessica Martinez de Hoz, with support from the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition team. I'm Hannah Vaughan Jones. So until next time, keep well. If anything in this podcast has affected you and you would like to speak with someone, you can also contact your local ovarian cancer patient group. To find your nearest ovarian cancer groups by country, please go to partners.worldovariancancercoalition.org.